Alright, today I'm going to be resetting the 1993 NHL roster, meaning that guys like Messier, Yager, Lemieux, Gretzky, Brodeur, you name it, all those great players from the 90s could be on brand new teams, because we're going to be doing a fantasy draft and resetting the entire NHL. And the Florida Panthers have the first overall pick in the fantasy draft. I will not be picking for the Florida Panthers. Whoever they want to take, I'm totally cool with it. I mean, but obviously they're going to take Gretzky, right? The Rangers have the second pick, LA, Hartford has the fourth pick, Pittsburgh's up there with 5, and all right, let's see who the Florida Panthers and the rest of this first round is going to take. Florida would end up taking Wayne Gretzky first overall, and Tony Amate will go second overall. Wait a minute, where the hell is Mario Lemieux at? Why did he not get taken in the first round? Lidstrom got taken 24th overall, Patrick Waugh 21st. Somehow Lemieux would fall down to the 19th pick of the second round. He got picked 19th in the second round by the Buffalo Sabres. That is insane. That is a steal of a pick. How did he fall that far? Alright, anyways, let's go check out the teams. Starting off with the Florida Panthers, this might be the greatest team of all time. They obviously have Wayne Gretzky at a 97 overall, Jaromir Jagr at a 94, Verbeek, who is an 86, and Peter Stastny as a second line center, 88 overall. Defensively, they're not the greatest overall. What the hell? Owen Power, 48 overall. Why is he on the Florida Panthers? And in goal, they have Grant Fuhr. Anaheim will take Jeremy Roenick and Alex McGillney. They have a pretty good roster overall. Defensively, they have Scott Niedermayer at a 92 overall. Boston's going to have Dave Poulin as their first line center. Defensively, they don't have any studs either. Buffalo is going to have Mario Lemieux, Teemu Selanne, and Wendell Clark as their first line. That is a stacked first line. Defensively, they have Phil Housley at a 90 overall, and Ed Belfour in the net at a 90 also. Calgary's not going to have the greatest team. They do have Owen Nolan at an 86, but overall not very good. And they have Felix Potvin in the net at an 85. Steve Yzerman is on the Chicago Blackhawks at a 92 overall. Keith Tkachuk is also there at an 86. Zubov is an 89 on D. Doug Gilmour is a Dallas Star, along with Chris Pronger, who is a 92 overall. The Detroit Red Wings have an absolutely stacked first line, 390 overalls, and they have Pat LaFontaine at an 88 as their second line center. They also have Chris Chelios on D, who is a 93 overall. Dennis Savard is on the Edmonton Oilers at a 90, along with Brett Hall, who is a 92. Hartford Whalers are going to have a very good team overall. Ruchinski at a 91, Mark Messier a 94. Eddie Olchuk is down there at 84. They also have Brendan Shanahan at an 89. Defensively, they have Al McGinnis at a 90, and Mr. Mike in the net at a 96 overall. LA has Sergei Fedorov at a 94, and not much else, to be honest. Defensively, though, they also have Nick Lidstrom at a 94, and they have Mike Vernon in the net at a 90. Montreal is not going to have many star players other than Cam Neely at a 90 overall. Defensively, they have Paul Coffey, though, at a 93. Eric Lindros is on the Devils at a 92 overall, along with Ray Ferraro, who is an 84. Defensively, nothing special here, to be honest. Dale Hawerchuk is on the New York Islanders at a 91, along with Mike Modano. Theo Fleury, Ron Francis, and Tony Amate are on the New York Rangers. That is an absolutely stacked first line, and Dominic Hasek in the net. That is a crazy powerhouse of a team. Ottawa has a decent team overall, and they have Marty Brodeur in net at a 94 overall. Philly has Alexei Yashin at an 85, Ron Brindamore as their second line center at an 87 overall, and they have Patrick Waugh, who is a 96 overall. Adam Oates is on the Pittsburgh Penguins, along with Robert Lang, Alexei Kovalev, Scott Stevens at a 91 overall. Quebec is going to have a decent team overall. Defensively, they do have Brian Leach, though, and they have Chris Osgood in the net at an 84 overall. Gary Roberts is on the San Jose Sharks, along with Joe Nieuwendyk and Yari Curry, who is a 92 overall. St. Louis Blues are going to have Luke Robitaille, Matt Sundin, and Peter Bondra as their first line, 92, 91, and 92. Tampa's going to have a decent team overall, nothing too special though. They do have Rob Blake at a 91 overall. Toronto is straight damn bad with this roster. This is a terrible roster. Defensively, I guess they have Gary Galley, but he's not very good either, 86. They have Ron Hextall in net at an 87. Vancouver has Adam Graves at a 91. They also have Marcus Naslund, who is an 83. The Winnipeg Jets are going to have Dale Hunter at an 88 and Pavel Bure at a 90. Isn't Dale Hunter like the head scout of the Toronto Maple Leafs or something? Either that or he coaches like the London Knights. I might be wrong. Michael Nylander is also here on the Winnipeg Jets. Shout out Willie Knee's dad, Daddy Nylander. Joe Sakic is on the Washington Capitals at a 93 93 overall along with Mike Gartner. And that is the rosters for our simulation. Now let's simulate and see what happens. Shout out to Kiss75 for making this roster. If you ever see me using a 90s roster, this is the guy who made it. So shout out to him. And for all you in the comments complaining about the roster, I did not make the roster. If there's misspelled words or players on different teams, don't blame me. The dude made a pretty good roster overall. With what he had to work with here, I mean, it's EA Sports at the end of the day. If you enjoy videos like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into the simulation. At the end of year number 1, the Buffalo Sabres were the best team in hockey with a 55-21-6 record, followed by the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Red Wings, and the Flyers. Tampa Bay, Calgary, and Ottawa were the 3 worst teams in hockey. Wayne Gretzky would have the most points in the entire NHL. He would also have 64 goals and 146 points, followed by Teemu Selanne with 133, Mario Lemieux, Brett Hall, Pavel Dimitria, Sergei Fedorov, Dennis Savard. For goals, Lemieux would have the most with 73, followed by Brett Hall, Wayne Gretzky, Theo Fleury's up there, Steve Yzerman, Fedorov. Phil Housley would have the most points by any D-man with 95, followed by Chris Chelios and Nick Lidstrom. Belfour and Mogg would tie for the most wins in the NHL with 38. Grant Fuhr would be up there with 34, Dominik Hasek at 31, Mike Vernon also at 31. Mike Vernon and Kirk McLean would tie for the most shutouts with 6 in the entire NHL, followed by Patrick Waugh, Andy Mogg, Ron Hextall. And this is the year 1 playoff bracket. Absolutely no surprise here, as we have Wayne Gretzky and the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final against the St. Louis Blues, and the Florida Panthers would end up winning the Stanley Cup, beating St. Louis in 7 games. Wayne Gretzky would take home the Selke and the Art Ross. Teemu Selanne would take home the Ted Lindsay, and Mario Lemieux would take home the Maurice Richard. Phil Housley would take home the Norris. Peter Stastny would take home the Conn Smythe, not Wayne Gretzky. Kirk McLean would take home the Vezina. Buffalo would yet again finish first in the entire NHL with a 60-18-4 record, followed by the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Hartford Whalers, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Red Wings. At the bottom of the league, it would be the Calgary Flames, the Winnipeg Jets, and the Boston Bruins. Gretzky would yet again, oh my god, he had 86 goals and 153 points, followed by Lemieux with 118, Brett Hall, Teemu Selanne, Pavel Dimitria, Steve Yzerman. Mark Messier would be up there with 102. Gretzky straight cleared everybody with 86 goals. The next closest would be Brett Hall with 67, followed by Lemieux, Howard Chuck, Steve Yzerman, but Gretzky would take the cake with 86 goals. Scott Niedermayer would have the most points by any defenseman with 96, followed by Nick Lidstrom 94, Phil Housley 82, and Chris Chelios 81. For goals, Nick Lidstrom had the most with 24, followed by Brian Leetch and Phil Housley. Grant Fuhr would have the most wins by any goalie with 43. Ron Hextall would have the most shutouts in the entire NHL with 6, followed by Patrick Waugh. And this is our year 2 playoff bracket, and the Chicago Blackhawks would end up winning the Stanley Cup as they beat the Florida Panthers in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. Gretzky would have the most points in the entire playoffs with 38, followed by Jaromir Jagr 31. Wait a minute, Gretzky had 21 goals? Wayne Gretzky is the greatest player of all time. He would take home the Selke, the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Nick Lidstrom would take home the Norris. Steve Yzerman would take home the Conn Smythe. The Edmonton Oilers would finish first in the entire NHL with a 52-21-9 record, followed by the Florida Panthers, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Ottawa Senators, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Montreal Canadiens would be the worst team in the entire NHL, followed by the Calgary Flames and the San Jose Sharks. Mario Lemieux would actually lead the entire NHL in points with 119, followed by Wayne Gretzky, Jermaine Titoff. There's no way that's his name. Teemu Selanne, Mark Messier. Lemieux would have the most goals with 65, followed by Pavel Dimitria, Wayne Gretzky. Fedorov would be up there with 41. Howard Chuck had 41. Sergei Zubov would have the most points by any defenseman. He only had 6 goals, but he had 95 assists, followed by Phil Housley and Nicholas Lidstrom. Scott Stevens would have the most goals in the entire NHL by a defenseman with 23. Grant Fuhr would have the most wins with 42, followed by Andy Mogg. Mike Vernon would have 37. Brodeur would have 37. And Hasek would have 36. For shutouts, Andy Mogg would have the most with 7. Actually, he was tied with Kirk McLean. And this is our year 3 playoff bracket. And the Chicago Blackhawks are yet again going to win the Stanley Cup as they beat the Florida Panthers in 5 games. Florida yet again makes the Stanley Cup final for the 3rd year in a row, but cannot get it done. Mario Lemieux would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Zubov would take home the Norris. The Conn Smythe again would go to Stevie Y, and the Selke to Dale Hunter. The Capitals would finish first in the entire NHL with a 58-20 21-3 record, followed by the Florida Panthers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Buffalo Sabres. Quebec would be the worst team in all of hockey, followed by the Vancouver Canucks and the Winnipeg Jets. Gretzky would yet again have the most points with 126, followed by Titoff. Wait a minute, what did I just say? Germain Titoff, I mean. Lemieux, Messier, Howard-Chuck, and Brendan Shanahan. Gretzky would have the most goals, only 2 more than Mario Lemieux, who had 66. Gretzky had 68. Howard-Chuck had 53. Shanahan, 52. Connor Bedard, wait a minute, where the hell did he come from? Connor Bedard's gonna have 47 goals in the 90s. He was born in 2005. He was still in his father's nutsack at this point. Phil Housley would have the most points by any D-man, followed by Sylvain Cote, whatever the hell his name is, Scott Niedermayer, and Scott Stevens. Nicholas Lidstrom would also have 70 points. Ed Belfour would have the most wins with 42, followed by Martin Brodeur and Grant Fuhr. Kirk McLean would have the most shutouts with 7, followed by Felix Potvin, who had 6. And this is what our year 4 playoff bracket looks like. Buffalo would go on to win the Stanley Cup as they beat Chicago in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. Wayne Gretzky would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Scott Stevens would take home the Norris. McLean would take home another Vezina. Florida would be the best team in all of hockey with a 60-17-5 record, followed by the Buffalo Sabres, the St. Louis Blues, and the Ottawa Senators. Gretzky would have a casual 78 goals and 150 points, followed by Kirk Mueller, Mario Lemieux, Alexander Semak, Titoff. I just can't take myself serious. Titoff, Germain Titoff, I think that's his name. For goals, Gretzky would obviously have the most with 78, followed by Mario Lemieux, who had 69. Nice. Brett Hall had 56. Fedorov would be down there with 43. Sakic had 41. Chris Chelios would have the most points by any defenseman with 81, followed by Sylvain Cote, Scott Niedermayer, Nick Lidstrom, and Desjardins. Grant Fuhr would have the most wins by any goaltender with 54, followed by Ed Belfour, 49. Martin Brodeur had 38. Patrick Waugh had 34. For shutouts, Grant Fuhr had the most with 8. Mike Vernon was down there with 5. Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, none of them are anywhere to be found here. And these are our Year 5 playoff matchups. Who's going to go out with a Stanley Cup? And for our final Stanley Cup matchup, it's going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Florida Panthers. And the Florida Panthers are finally going to win the Stanley Cup. This is their 4th time in the Stanley Cup final out of 5 seasons, and they finally get it done, beating Toronto in 4 games. A clean sweep. Wayne Gretzky is your Conn Smythe winner, obviously. Who else would it be? He's been on an absolute tear. And finally, Wayne Gretzky is coming to lift the Stanley Cup for the first time after 4 unsuccessful tries. Well, actually 3 unsuccessful tries. But now Wayne Gretzky is finally a Stanley Cup champion. With the Florida Panthers, I might add, who might actually win the Stanley Cup in real life this season. And there it is, the Florida Panthers are your Year 5 Stanley Cup champions. Gretzky would quite possibly have the greatest playoff run of all time. 36 goals and 53 points. Gretzky would pretty much take home all the awards, including the Conn Smythe. And that is gonna do it for this video, boys. If you enjoyed the video, show some love, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, all of that. And remember, don't be silly, wrap your willy.